We were in Nigeria on Father's Day, and we heard that same story about McDonald's. It's an inspiration in any country, any place in the world. You know, just a few weeks ago, for those of you who may not be aware, my husband Dave and I returned from a 2-month trip to Nigeria where we served under the auspices of our denominational Nigeria Crisis Response Team as ambassadors of sorts. After having traveled last year to Nigeria with our Take 10, Tell 10 team, it became clear that for my time of Sabbath rest this year, I was being called to serve for a longer time in Nigeria. And it was something that Dave and I wanted to experience together. Our denomination wisely encourages that Sabbath rest be included in long-term planning to benefit both pastors and congregations. And you all have been very diligent over the years in honoring that time of Sabbath for your pastors. That is not only commendable, it's a real gift of love. It's a time for renewal, recharging, rejuvenating, and yes, resting. So as we began to talk about our plans to travel to Nigeria, we were asked, for good reason, and just how will that be resting? Well, not to worry. We wrote some times of rest into our days, morning prayers together, good books that we read just for the fun of it. We even watched a little TV when we had a good internet connection. You know, it's one of the few times during our 42 years of marriage that we had so much time with just the two of us, pretty much 24/7 for 2 whole months. I thought it was pretty cool. I think Dave did too. I'm watching you. That's pretty intense. But it was really good. One Sunday morning, early in our trip, our guide Marcus took our picture when we were laughing. And unbeknownst to us, he posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Bride and Groom." So you're not going to believe this, but we got many likes. And we got comments of congratulations to the newlyweds. So anyhow, it was good. Well, our time away was certainly a change of pace from everyday life right here in the U.S., and that just in itself was restful. We even learned to live a little bit on Nigeria time, and every day was really quite an adventure. Just ask us about the mouse in our house in Kwarhi, who we eventually named Rat Boy. So that gives you a hint. And some very, very, very large birds who nested in the trees that shaded the driveway and who did a real number on the car that we had parked below one night. And then there was the baboon in the dining room at the game reserve who sat on the hostess counter and watched us eat while she nursed her baby. And so much more. We're planning to put together a presentation with lots of pictures and stories, which we'll share with you soon. Including lots of highlights about the tractors that we helped to purchase. This morning, I'd like to share with you differently. Not so much a this is what we did kind of thing or a travelogue with pictures. Part of my re-entry plan into ministry was to meet with my spiritual director soon after returning. A gentle and peaceful Quaker, she somehow finds the right questions, the perfect questions, to get to the point. They're zingers that make me think carefully and reflect deeply. Our meeting this week was no exception, as she asked, "What stirrings of the Spirit have you experienced? What are the nudges that might call for your response? How are you changed? How does what you experienced in Nigeria influence your ministry here?" And so I began to share with her, and she reflected to me, "You have had an intense experience, intensity of both joy and pain." And that's true. I have a hunch that I will be asking myself these questions over and over again. It's too much to fully comprehend and to synthesize in just a few weeks that we've been home. But one thing that I've returned to again and again was the choir piece. "How long? Press on, send me." And with these words in mind, here are also the words of the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk 1:1-4. The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous. Therefore judgment comes forth perverted. And from the second chapter, verses 1 through 4, according to the prophet, I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what God will say to me and what God will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end, and it does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them. But the righteous live by their faith. Well, this passage reflects so well the text of that choral piece, as well as the experience and the spirit of our time with our sisters and brothers in Nigeria. The book of Habakkuk is a lament or a complaint to God. Devastation and violence had broken out across the land. Justice had been replaced by injustice. How long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen, or cry to you for violence, and you will not save? The Babylonian armies were invading Judah, and there was lawlessness and destruction. And that sounds all too familiar. Just a different time and a different place. Here in Scripture, Habakkuk protests to God, why, O Lord? How long? The people of Nigeria, and in particular, our own sisters and brothers of the Church of the Brethren in Nigeria, the EYN, have suffered much at the hands of Boko Haram. Since the 2014 insurgency in the Northeast, more than 23,000 people have been killed by the Boko Haram. 11,000 of those are brethren. Additionally, 70% of its members have been displaced. There are still 16,000 EYN members in refugee camps in Cameroon alone, barely surviving, and thousands of others in internally displaced person camps, or IDP camps, in Nigeria. And over 1,600 churches have been destroyed or damaged. Imagine that. Everyone's life has been touched in some way, or even in many, many ways. Meet Sarah. I learned to know her where she lives at the Interfaith IDP camp, Gurku. It was a beautiful day, a sunny afternoon, and she invited me to sit on a rock outcropping and have a conversation. And we began to talk friendly together. It was very interesting. And then she said, you may want to watch for snakes. So we decided that we would move to some chairs and continue our conversation. Sarah's life has not been easy. She has 8 children, 3 of whom are living. Her husband left her and is with his 5th wife. As a Christian, however, Sarah's faith is strong. She was a student at Culp Bible College when the insurgency came through in October 2014. It was known that the Boko Haram were on the move, but no one knew just how close they were. On the morning of October 29th, she and some classmates were waiting at their classroom for their teacher to arrive. Sensing the impending danger, some of the staff had already left. Then the group of students heard gunshots coming from a nearby village. Sarah ran back to her room to get her diplomas and to get her Bible. They were that important to her. When she went back outside, she found that her classmates had already fled into the bush. And she said it felt like the rapture because everyone had disappeared. Eventually, she was able to get a passing motorbike ride to another nearby village where she found one of her friends at home, and they decided that they would flee together. Before they left the house, they prayed, and then they ran outside and headed to the bush with bullets falling all around them. They could hear them hitting the ground. Sarah said that she was glad that they had left the house because if they died, they wanted it to be outside so that their families would have bodies to mourn. That Sarah and her friend were able to dodge all of the bullets and escape safely, she attributes to God's grace. God is able, she said. Sarah returned to Culp Bible College when it reopened the year following the insurgency. As one who highly values education, she now has another diploma to add to those that she ran back to save. She is one of the EYN Women Theologians, a group of 50 or more women with extensive theological training. In a church that will not yet ordain women, these women provide much leadership and spiritual depth. Sarah and I ended our visit that day, but not before we prayed together. I had the privilege to pray for Sarah, for her family, for her future plans, and for peace in Nigeria, that someday she might be able to return home to her village in the Northeast. We parted, promising to keep in touch. Asking how long, O Lord, does not imply a lack of faith. Arguing and questioning God presumes a foundation of faith. Asking the question, how long, presupposes that there's someone listening. And as I met with Sarah, and as we met with so many others, we oftentimes found ourselves weeping together, crying out, how long, O Lord, knowing full well that there is someone listening, someone who hears our prayers. One fine Sunday in May, it might have been Father's Day, I don't know, we, along with Marcus, the founder of the IDP camp at Gurku, drove there for Sunday morning worship. It was lively, celebratory, and joyful, and we were the guests of honor. Marcus leaned over during the service, and he said, I always cry when I come to worship here at Gurku. I see how joyful the people are after what they've been through. Here is a taste of what we experienced with them. The words to this song translate something like, I will be victorious, I am happy for this day. If I check my life, I'm not the reason I'm praising God. How could you not be filled with joy? And the preacher that morning, my friend Sarah, and her theme, everything is possible with God. You know, I think that we will be processing our experience in Nigeria for some time. So intense is both the joy and the pain. And I'm not fully sure how will it affect my ministry here, although I think it has already in many ways. If at this point there is one takeaway that has been etched in my memory, it is of a beautiful people who have undoubtedly asked and continue to ask, how long, O Lord? But their faith is deep, and their belief in, commitment to, and practice of prayer make it possible for them to press on, even with joy. Just as Habakkuk stood at his watchpost high on that rampart wall, planting himself squarely where God could see him and where he could keep watch for God, our sisters and brothers stand where God can see them and they can see God, and they press on together Habakkuk knew that God's response was not to him alone, but to his whole community who were suffering. By our sharing faith, deep faith with one another, and praying with and for one another, whether it's here in Elizabethtown or on the other side of the world, we stand on the ramparts together, and we never have to cry out to God alone or wait for God alone. And that brings us to the third and the final movement of our choral piece, Send Me. In our going to Nigeria, we knew that we were not alone. We were unmistakably enveloped by your love and your prayers. And it's difficult to express how much that meant to us, and it literally carried us at times. Many people have asked, how can we continue to help our friends in Nigeria? And in response, we join them and we say, pray, pray, pray. We were able to share in many settings that each Church of the Brethren U.S. had been assigned one of the abducted girls from Chibok to pray for, and people were incredibly touched that we would do that. They know that prayer is a first response. We have seen firsthand the excellent ways that the Nigeria Crisis Fund is being used to help many survive, and not only survive, but find hope. We experienced firsthand that giving is important. Money is needed in a land of food insecurity and scarcity for what has grown to be 5.2 million people starving. And many families don't have the few naira necessary to send their children to school when education is their hope for the future. Maybe most importantly, what we can do best to help is to continue to live into our call as Elizabethtown Church of the Brethren, that we raised money for a tractor and a half in less than 3 weeks is amazing. If we weren't a strong, thriving, and growing congregation, that may not have been a possibility. Our strategic plan, including bricks and mortar improvements, will only serve to undergird our ministry as we and future generations serve God and neighbors near and far. Back in April, on our very first Sunday in Nigeria, we attended the Abuja Church, and we sang this next hymn. Now, it might have had a little bit different cadence, maybe a couple of drums, but the same. Beautiful faces, beautiful voices, beautiful colors, there and here. Trust and obey, for there's no other way.